name is William Alfred Rich. I was born in Graham, North Carolina, and I was named after my two granddaddies, Alfred Heritage and William Rich. I'm not supposed to do this. I'm a wiggle worm. Well, I grew up there in North Graham and attended public schools in Graham in one building, not two or three buildings then. There were only 11 years for graduation then. You graduated in your 11th year, not your 12th. And after graduating from high school, which was the year after Pearl Harbor, in 42. So I was ripe for the draft. I had a short time to do other things before I was drafted. And I was drafted and did my boot training in Camp Croft, South Carolina. And at that time, the services were so needful of servicemen that you had your choice. You weren't just assigned to the Army or the Marines or the Navy. You had your choice. When we left Graham, there were 6 of us boys from North Graham. And I was the only one who had already chosen the Navy. I didn't enjoy the prospects of digging foxholes, so I would rather have sailed on a ship and took the chance of being drowned. So from Camp Croft, I was sent to Great Lake Naval Training Station in Great Lakes, Illinois. And that was a place where, along with other naval training stations, the Navy did their training for all positions in the Navy. So during my training there, I developed appendicitis and had emergency surgery because my appendix had busted. And after spending 5 to 6 weeks in the hospital, you see, at that time, appendicitis, it wasn't same-day surgery. Because when the Navy, when they wanted you back back in prime condition. They didn't want another sick sailor on their hand. So you stayed in the hospital a good while. Well, by the time I finished my stay in the hospital, the group I was originally with had moved on. So I had to go back in the beginning with another group and spend another 8 weeks in basic training. Well, when I finished basic training, we did get a leave at that time. Then we all were offered a choice as to what we would like to do while we were serving. And we took a test, Aptitude Test, to see what we were really naturally inclined to do. Well, back up a moment. Before I was drafted, I tried to volunteer. I went down to Raleigh and tried to volunteer in the Naval Air Force. I didn't pass because I didn't have 20/20 vision. And the Navy liked their pilots to see perfectly. I didn't. So I came back home, and they would take those who couldn't see very well to do anything. So they gave me the aptitude test, And the interviewer asked me, he said, now, what would you like to do while you served in the Navy? I said, I'd like to be an aircraft mechanic. The interviewer took my aptitude test and looked at it. Not you. He said, now, you would be a good storekeeper or a yeoman. Well, I was just 18 years old and I had no idea what a yeoman was doing. But I had always liked to sell things and I enjoyed being a merchant. So, storekeeper, I knew what they did. I thought, I'll take that. Good choice, because I like my occupation as a storekeeper, dealing with supplies on the ship and doing the best I could in the payroll department, etc. So there was another 12 weeks I spent at Great Lakes going to school to be a storekeeper. Maybe I should not mention this, but in my class of storekeeper, of 25 men, I was the anchor. You know what that is? You know, okay.
Last one.
Last one in the class. Well, I thought it was funny. It didn't bother me. I was in the Navy and I was a storekeeper and I did the best I could. But I was going to not be burdened with it. I was going to live my life the best I could in what I could do. Well, so there was another, I guess it was 12 weeks, something like that. It was the middle of winter and the atmosphere in that part of Illinois was harsh. That was the one time in my life that I walked in snow knee deep and had to shovel some of the walks too. Well, after that, I was assigned to Rhode Island, there to wait until a ship could be assigned to me, or I should be assigned to a ship. And they were assigned to ships in alphabetical order. Well, Mama was rich. And there were twin boys their name was Reed. Those two boys were assigned to an aircraft carrier, which was one thing I had in mind. But I wasn't in that alphabet the right place. So I was assigned to an AKA, a ship that carried invasion people. And our job was to come in as close as we could to invasion beachheads. And then we carried on our ship small boats, LCM and LCVPs. That's a landing craft mechanical, carried trucks and tanks, etc. And LCVP was landing craft personnel, which carried troops. Well, when we came to an invasion beachhead, we loaded those small boats with whatever the Army wanted. And we set sail from the mothership and took these men and material to the beach. Well, maybe I'm jumping a little ahead, because when we left Norfolk, Virginia, went through the Okinawa Canal onto Hawaii, loaded down with material and men, and then to Guadalcanal, which was an island very close to New Guinea. And the Australians and the Americans, I think they were the only troops, and those were the only nations. Simply, as you can understand, the Japanese were trying to conquer New Guinea, because then Australia would be wide open. So the Australians were very active in their defense of New Guinea. And Guadalcanal was an island where the Japanese had an air base. So we were fighting the Japanese in New Guinea and also Guadalcanal. The Japanese thought that if they could just run us off of Guadalcanal, then New Guinea would be easy. But it didn't happen, thankfully. So we were deployed from Hawaii to Guadalcanal. But when we got there, the Americans had already won victory over the Japanese there. So we still had men and material on board ship. So from there, this was in July. Well, from there we were deployed to the Philippines. And this was the first invasion of the Philippines. And we did that just like I was describing. The mothership would lay a few hundred yards offshore. The small boats with men and material would invade the beachhead. This is in Lady Gulf, Lady Island. And not incidentally, but Douglas MacArthur had promised when he left the Philippines from Corregidor in the Bataan Peninsula, his famous phrase was, I shall return. That's where he returned, at Lady Gulf on Lady Island. And the Japanese tried to block the entrance to Lady Gulf. L-E-Y-T-E, not L-E-D-Y. And that's a great naval battle, the Battle of the Philippine Sea. And it was one of the first battles that the American Navy had won, because they had fought the Battle of Coral Sea, where Guadalcanal was trying to stop the Japanese supply line. It was called Tokyo Express. But the Battle of the Philippine Sea was the first naval battle that the American Navy had fought and won. So during that time that we were supplying Lady, that's when the Marines invaded Iwo Jima, and great loss of life. We just heard about it, we weren't active in it, because we were busy loading up where we're going to, which we did, plan to invade the island of Luzon, which is the main island of the Philippines. Well, on our way, here's Lady, we had to go around this way from Luzon. On the way, the Japanese were trying to stop us from getting on the main island of the Philippines. So they threw everything they had at us. And that was one time that I did become very much acquainted with the purpose of the aircraft carrier, because aircraft carriers are all kind of warships were accompanying the convoy that was going to invade Luzon. And at one time, the aircraft carrier was out here, standing along beside of us, and a kamikaze came down and dove right into the fantail. I can't imagine how many men were killed at that time. Well, we were successful in Luzon and soon occupied the city of Manila. Well, the next point where an invasion was necessary, which was in April 1st of 1944, was Okinawa. And did same scenario. We sent invasion force into the beach, and with our LCVPs and our LCMs, and we were successful there. Many hundreds of planes were destroyed, both Japanese and American, because at that time, the next step planned was the islands of Japan, because they're adjacent to one another, Okinawa and the islands of Japan. So they just threw everything they had. Well, this was 44. So you may remember from what you have heard that the atomic bomb was dropped in August of 1944. See the timeline here. March of 44, invasion of Okinawa. And we occupied that land, that island. The American plan was, of course, Japanese proper. We were prepared to do that, and to estimate we'd lose 1 million men. The atomic bomb put a stop to that. And we all know that, not from experience, but from publicity and history. Hiroshima, big boy, and Nagasaki, little boy. And the war ended in August of 45, but my service with the Navy was not over, because the men who had been deployed and we had helped deploy wanted to come home. You understand that? So we had to bring them back home. So our job in the Navy then was to get those men and bring them back. So our job at that time was to go to the northern island of Japan, Nagasaki, and load those men up and bring them back home. And we came back home by what was called the Great Circle Route. We hear that the straightest line between 2 points is straight, but we live on a globe. So sometimes the crooked line, the circular line, is shorter. And we were in the northern island of Japan. And that was the shortest route. But it was up near the Aleutians, and it was cold. See, we've been in the southern part of the globe. Now we went to the northern part of the globe, and they issued us fur-lined parkas and cold weather gear. And then after we had done that, our job was pretty much done. I happened to be in San Francisco when VE Day occurred, victory. And of all the rabble-rousing that you ever seen, you would have seen it there in San Francisco. Over, everything's over. Hallelujah. We're going home. Oh, those who were still overseas were going home, but all of us were over. And then I was discharged from Naval Base in Southern California in '46. And then I was on my way home, and I mean home with capital H-O-M-E. I didn't mention my civilian life before I went into the service. I graduated from public schools in Graham, North Carolina. Then after the war was over, the government was very beneficent, called the GI Bill. And the former servicemen, the government gave them a free education for every month they served in the service. They received a year free education. And that was very beneficial to me, because in the meantime, I thought the Lord had called me to his ministry. But in order to answer that call, our denomination required that you get a college and seminary education. It's been very hard for me to do that without the GI Bill of Rights. And you mentioned a moment ago about what lessons. I went in the Navy when I was 18 years old, innocent as a newborn baby. I didn't know anything. The Navy taught me the most valuable lesson I think anybody can ever learn. You learn independence. You learn to take care of yourself, because no mother and daddy around, no friends that you have known or around. So anything, you got to make up your mind. What you're going to do, who your friends are going to be. You've got to make these decisions with no help from anyone. That was the greatest lesson, I think, that anybody ever learned, independence. Well, then, since I knew I had to have an education, and which I only had a high school education, I enrolled in a Methodist school in Hiawassee, Tennessee. That was a junior college. I graduated from Hiawassee in '48 and transferred to Elon College. And graduated from Elon in 1950. Well, then I had to get a seminary education to follow that. So I graduated from Duke University in 1953. And along the line, I met the love of my life. And believe it or not, she had moved into the Northern Realm while I was out sailing the seven seas. But I met her after I got out, and we were married in 1949. You can be married and raise a family and go to school too, if you set your mind to it. And we had 4 beautiful daughters. I just have one of them, Jennifer. And of course, they've been the joy of my life. I'm not sure what they feel the same about theirs, but And my wife, I said she was the love of my life. I'm not sure about mine or hers. And she's already gone home to be with the Lord. She had that dread disease, Alzheimer's. But we were married for 60 years. And with her death, part of me died. But I've still got some of it. Part of it here. Now, I think I've covered about everything, unless you have a question.
I have a question. What was some of the favorite food that you remember eating on your ship? And then number two, did you ever get seasick?
Let me take the last one first. I never got seasick. But for favorite foods, I don't know where I should mention this or not. I'll just tell you what it was. It was a piece of toast with corned beef on top of it. Do any of you know what that was called?
Not sure.
No.
Well, to me it was good food. Now remember, I was raised in a depression. And my mother never brought me to the table and said, or before the table, said, Billy, what do you want for supper? We ate what was on the table and called it good. Mm-hmm. Now, you hear a lot of people call about the terrible food and the services. Quite frankly, it was the best food I ever had. Even this, what's the name on the toast?
Corned beef.
There's another name to it. So
But did the ship, when you were going over there, did you feel it rocking? And I know you had to go through some storms and stuff.
Well, yes, I remember one storm when we were in the China Sea, when you were doing like this. And one of my posts at that time was up in the crow's nest. And the ship was doing this, but I was doing this, because it's up top. But I didn't get seasick. I was glad when my watch was over.
Did you have any really favorite characters, people, any unusual individuals that you could tell us about that you met while you were in service?
Yes, and I think that's also the thing that can be very enjoyable when you're away from home, and if you know who you associate with. And this one boy, he and I struck up a friendship. His name was George Smouse. He was a Roman Catholic. I was Protestant. That never even occurred to me that he was of a different religion. We were friends, and we went on liberty together. And there was another older man who was a baker on the ship. His name was Schultz, I think he was. He was a Jew. Well, there two of my good friends. One was Catholic, one was Jewish. And here I was in Protestant. It didn't make any difference. We were serving in the Navy, serving our country. Several things happened. I don't know how many of you remember or know about Roman Catholic observance.
So say about your tattoo.
What?
Your tattoo.
Oh. Well, you see, where is it on the other? Believe it or not, as a minister, I do have a tattoo. And the story of that tattoo, and I can't get my shirt off now, but anyway, go on button.